Okay, let's look at importing things to Adobe Animate. So I've got a series of files, some that are from different Adobe programs, some that are just video clips, sound, that kind of thing, and we're going to try importing them and we'll see how it goes, and how we can get something that's editable and useful for your files. So, when we import anything to Adobe Animate, we go to here, File, and Import to Stage or Import to Library. If we import to the stage, it will just stick in here immediately. If we import to the library, it will go to our library section here. I think for easiness, it's best to go to Import to Library so you can check your settings before you put it straight onto the stage. So I've got a series of weird files here to try importing. We've got just a regular image, a PSD file, an MP3 file, an MP4 file, and an Illustrator file. So obviously you don't have all of these are just ones that I pulled out of my personal files. I'll put timestamps in the description for, each of the files as I go through them. So if you just want to know how to import an MP4 or video file, head to there. If you want to do the PSD or a JPEG, that's there. You're willing to watch them through, but I know you can't follow along if you don't have the file type, but, sit back and take a look. So first, let's look at exporting a simple JPEG. Really easy. PNG, JPEG, they'll all work the same way. We've imported it to library, so over here in our library option we have it. If I drag it on, hey, it's there. I can play with it in the transform settings just like you would an object in Animate. It can be motion tweened and converted into a symbol. There we go. So yeah, JPEG's pretty quick, pretty easy. So let's have a look at importing a different thing. Let's try a PSD file. I'm going to just open it in Photoshop so we can see what it looks like. I've got a really simple file here. I've got a little zombie gangster. He has a separate head from his body, so maybe we can try doing some head animation. If you want to animate things on different layers, you got to put them on different layers. I really, really suggest naming your layers before you import. Okay, so let's just import them. We'll get these options here, PSD import to the library. If you want to have separate layers, you've got to make sure you've got bitmap image with editable layer styles ticked. Everything else should be okay. If you want it to be high quality, pick lossless. So we've got our options here. Animate layers, single animate layer, keyframes. The keyframes would make it so each of your layers would correspond to a keyframe, so head would be on keyframe 1, body would be on keyframe 2. If you had an animation that you'd maybe made in Photoshop layers, you could put them in 1, 2, 3 sequentially. Single animate layer will basically do what this is here, flattened bitmap image. It will just flatten it into one single image, no layers. And animate layers will convert them into animate layers, which is what we want, so import. Okay, so we've got our PSD here, so we can drag him in. Pretty cool. If we double click, you'll see it's very much like a symbol. We've got nested layers going on, so now if I wanted to, I could move my pivot point down to his head, and I can animate him just like if I had drawn him in Animate itself. So yeah, that's how you would import a Photoshop file. Okay, so let's look at importing from Illustrator. So same dynamic, file, import, import to library. We've got our Illustrator file here. Let's take a look at it in Illustrator. In Illustrator, just like in Photoshop, I've got everything that I want to be able to be movable on different layers. This is more of a background one, so the floor is different from the background, different from any objects in the background. Okay, so let's go back to Animate. Let's import it. We'll get the option here. It's showing us all the different paths, but really it's going to pay attention to the layers that we've made in the file. But the paths will be editable, which is what's so good about Illustrator. Convert layers to animate layers. Same thing as the Photoshop deal. Keyframes would mean every layer would be on a different frame. Single animate layer would put them all flattened, and animate layers will keep the layers but convert them into animate layers. Okay, so let's import. Let's go take a look at our library. Tree test. Drag it in. There we go. So make it bigger, fit the scene. We can click into it, and you'll see that we have got layers here, just like we did in Illustrator, and you can convert these separately to symbols and animate them. It's also kept all the paths, so if you wanted to edit these even more, you could go onto them with the subselection tool and mess with them some more, so that's pretty useful. That's the perk of working in two vector-based programs rather than, say, like in Photoshop where you're switching from rasterize to vectorize. Okay, let's import our MP3 file next. So import to library. Here's our MP3 file. I picked a video game soundtrack. Let's import it. You can see it here in the library. Now, if I drag this onto my stage, you can see that it actually gets assigned to a layer, and we have to give it the frames here to see the sound playing out. Now, before you play anything, make sure you go to Properties here, and you take a look at this sound option. It'll appear in whichever layer it has the sound on. You'll be able to see it here. So, most important, this sync option here. Event, start, stop, and stream. Now, if it says start, do not hit play until you've changed it off start. If I were to play it now, it would just start and continue playing. I would not be able to pause it until it ended. This is left over from when Animate was Flash, and this was more of an option for putting into games or putting onto websites where you just wanted it to start as soon as a sequence begun and not end, or sound effects, for example. But because we are putting this along animation, we want to make sure we are on stream. Now, stream is great because as we scrub through our timeline, you can hear the sound waves going. So if I press play now, we get it playing alongside. Excellent. So that's how you'd import a sound file. So if you want this to start a little bit later, say you've got a sound effect that you want to come in at a certain point, all you need to do is just go insert keyframe, make sure it's on a new frame, and then drag it directly where you're selected. So now you can see that actually we've got it starting a little bit later. Overlapping noises. So if you had a sound effect, just make a new keyframe, drag it on. I recommend picking one layer and calling it sound. If you've got multiple sound effects going on, you might need to make another layer for effects. But don't put, it's very easy to put visuals on the same layer as sound, and that can be very confusing, so keep them separate. Okay, now let's import our final file, an MP4. So if I go for File Import, I can import to library or I can import to video. It'll actually lead to the same option, so I'll do library, just so we're doing the same thing. Hit my MP4 and open, and we'll get this import video window coming up. Now, we've got several options here. You can load external video with playback component, which is useful for web development and game development, but not so useful for what we probably want, which is a video that will play alongside, whatever we're animating or drawing, maybe for reference or maybe just as a sort of background part. This is about the same option as adding in something with this feature, which allows you to take URLs straight from, an online source and put them into your file. They're referencing from a different program, and they'll put it in, and you'll get a little player that you can play with, like you're putting it into a PowerPoint or something. But what we want to make it a little bit more customizable is one of these guys embedding the video. We don't want to embed as an FLV. It's a very old file type that Adobe used to support, but it doesn't really anymore. So we want to go for the H.264, which is really encompasses all MP4 and MOV files, which is likely what your video will be. So let's hit next. We've got symbol type here, same as symbols. Embedded video, movie clip graphic, they'll change the options, but we'll go for embedded video for now. Place instance on stage, that will just put it straight on, otherwise it just goes to the library. Expand timeline if needed, that's great because it will just give the amount of time the video takes to play for the whole timeline. And include audio, let's just click yep. So here it is, let's take a look. So if I just play through this, you can see that I can control the video via the timeline, just like if I had animated it. Now, if you're rotoscoping, I guess you could draw over it, but what I recommend is that you use these clips as reference. So we can make the video smaller, put it in the corner. Let's just try, using it just to kind of base some poses up or something. So yeah, there we've got a kind of cat that's based off of a clip. We're able to use video to help us make our animation. Of course, like I said, if you were really interested in doing rotoscoping, you just have to zoom in and trace over the clip, really. Though I'd like to see you guys referencing rather than just tracing. The rotoscope is its own art. It can be really, really useful for when you're just learning how to do poses, or you need some references on how to do full body actions. Disney animators do it, and why not you? So yeah, that's the basics of how to import files onto Animate. Hope it was useful, and hope that your file format was mentioned. If not, you can always ask me if you have any issues.